Hey guys, welcome and thank you for being here. In this lesson, we're going to learn how to paint colorful flowers with acrylics. I'll walk you through every step so that you can follow easily, and hopefully you can catch certain techniques that would help you in your artwork. We're going to learn how to blend a simple background, and then we're going to focus on layering the flowers and adding color, shadows, and creating smooth transitions. This is a great lesson for anyone that wants to learn how to work with acrylics. Alright my friends, let's go over the materials needed for this piece and have fun. I'm going to be painting on a 16 by 12 gallery canvas. Gallery means it's thicker and studio is thinner. So whichever one you decide, it's totally fine. Even the size. If your size is bigger, just keep in mind to add a little more paint when we go into mixing. If it's smaller, add a little less, right? And I don't need to add anything to it because it already has gesso coat on it. That's why it's white. The only thing you can add if your canvas is loose is add a glaze of water and let it naturally dry. Usually that tightens up the canvas and makes it nice and firm. You want your canvas to be firm because it's going to be easier to work. For brushes, I'm going to use 2 of my M1 blending brushes. And then we're going to use my 4-piece brush set here, and I'll show you what's inside. We have the number 8 and number 4 brushes. They're the same style, just a size smaller. And I use these a lot for creating texture and little blends, and I'll show you how I work with these. And then we have a 1/2 inch flat brush for all the hard edge lines, and finally a 0 detail brush for all the little fine details. For paint, I'm going to use my 24 set of acrylics, and I'll show you which colors from this set. Medium yellow, orange, scarlet red, viridian, cobalt blue, violet, and lamb black. From my 5 set of acrylics, I'm going to use titanium white. And I'm going to use my palette paper here and a palette knife to mix your paint. A jar of water, some paper towels to dab your brushes onto or wipe your palette knife. And if you have a hairdryer, go ahead and use that. Once you added your blend, you want to make sure your background is dry before applying your next layers on top. You could use any materials you have available, but if you are interested in what I'm using, I'm actually doing a holiday sale on my website. You can check it out at ColorByFeliks.com for more details. Alright, I'm going to quickly explain the plan. I like to start from the furthest distance and work my way to whatever is closest to me. But for this piece, first we're going to quickly add a sketch and placement of our flowers, and then when I go into mixing the background blend, probably some paint is going to go over the sketch that I did, but that's okay. We just want to get a general idea, and then we're going to add the blend of the background, and it's going to be pretty dark and simple. And then after that, we're then going to go over the flowers and decide the placement of them. From there, we're going to add our first colors to our flowers, and then it's still going to look kind of rough, but that's okay, because the more layers you add to the painting, the more you start to see the image more clear. So then the second, third, and fourth layers are going to be detailing and making them look soft, and you can adjust, add more flowers if you want. And your flowers could be bigger or smaller, and you can add placements wherever you think would look best. Totally up to you. Let's see what happens and have fun. Let's pick up violet and use only this color for this first part. Something different, and then use the number 4 brush, dab it in the water, and then with more water and not too much paint, okay, we're gonna have a little more water. We're gonna have like a flower, probably, let's start from the top. This is where the top probably will be, and it's just gonna go somewhere right here, right? This is kind of the center, and then I'm going to dab my brush in the water and then use a little bit of paint, more water, and then continue this. Okay. And remember, your shape does not have to look like mine. You know how flowers are. They could look very unique and different. Okay, and then it's going to go in, and then maybe there's one kind of coming out at the side here. something like this. Our first rough sketch, right? I'm going to dab my brush in the water, continue using this violet color, okay, with water. All right, and our number 4 brush. Next to it, there will be another flower here. Just getting an idea, a rough idea. Obviously, this is going to be, it's going to be covered, and we're going to make another layer. So it's not going to look the same. I'm going to be adjusting, and then there's going to be like little details inside. Same thing in there, something like that. And I could skip this step and just blend the background, right? But because I don't want to go inside the middle too much, right? I'm just getting an idea, so I won't, like I said, waste paint. There'll be like a little bit of a flower here coming in, almost to the edge, something like that. Okay, and then follow this flower, and it's just gonna go in like this. And this part, we're just kind of, you know, we're gonna blend, and it's gonna be covered here, this part. But I'm just showing you guys how I get the first layers of how I sketch my flowers, and then see how it looks, and if I need to adjust something. There'll be another little flower that didn't bloom yet, but it's very fresh and about to, maybe on the side right here. Okay, maybe there's some little ones here. All this is going to be covered again, like I mentioned. So this is just to give you guys a visual idea, you know. This one almost opened up, right? There, that's good enough. Now you see where I need to add the blend. I'm going to add the dark background and cover everything here. And then we're going to repeat the process and kind of get another sketch of the flowers with a lighter color going over what we did here. And for the background colors, this is what I added. Half a thumb amount of white here, and then more cobalt blue, and then lamb black and viridian. All right. Next, added less white. All right, and then more, almost the same amount of cobalt blue here, just a little more viridian and more lamb black. And then here, as you see, very small amount of white, and then more cobalt blue, and then violet, and then more lamb black, and a little bit of viridian. Okay, and then a little more viridian, no white. There's cobalt blue, violet, and more lamb black here. And by the way, I do have a color mixing guide in the description below if you'd like to download that. It's free. It just makes it easy to follow and to know the amount of ratio I add for each color. Okay, so I'm going to pick up my palette knife and start from the lightest and mix my way to the darkest. All right, I dabbed my palette knife in the water and cleaned it with a paper towel real quick, so it's ready for next use. And these are the colors I got. It's almost like a grayish, leaning towards more of a purple blue tones. And then here, because we had a viridian, it's leaning towards more green side, gray green. But something like this, it does not have to look exactly, but something similar, and you'll be good to go. We're gonna add the lighter parts here on the bottom, and then add the darker ones on top. So let's pick up our M1 blending brush and the water jar and dab it all the way in the water, and then squeeze part of the water out. Okay, so there's still some water, but it's not, you know, dripping. And basically the goal is not to have water running on your canvas, but just enough. If you see some bubbles when you spread, that's good. But if you see water, you know, starting to kind of drip, that means you have too much water, and I'd encourage to pick up more paint and kind of blend it and equalize it and make sure it's not too much. But a little bit of water in here helps keep acrylic stay wet longer, because once you added all the colors you want, then when you go into dry blending brush, you will start to blend them in nicely and it'll work very clean. It'll be very smooth. And that's why I like to use water. It helps with that. Okay, so let's start with the lighter parts. So my brush, and then let's just use a little bit of this lighter color and randomly add it. Like I said, we're going to cover a lot of this. I just kind of did that to give you guys an idea. Okay, so you see bubbles there? That's good. That's what we want. So add like a little blend here, and then we can go into the next darkest color. I'm not dabbing my brush in the water. See, I'm gonna skip this area I kind of went over, but that's okay. Because okay, that's good enough. Next, because I still feel like I have enough water in there, so I'm gonna go in a little bit in here and then start to make it a little darker. And you can move your canvas around, whatever is easier for you, okay? Okay. Okay, dab my brush lightly in the water, use more of this darker color, and kind of go around the areas. Dab my brush in the water. Let's use a little more of this darker one. And then we're going to transition, dab my brush in water, to the darkest color. Okay, mix it in real quick. Get an idea. You can bring it down. Okay, I have enough water, so I'm going to continue adding paint. Okay, lightly dab my brush in water, use more paint, and then mix it in here. And it's okay, like I said, if you cover your sketch. But you start to see the transitions, right? The colors transitioning. I'm dabbing my brush in the water, using the darkest color, and making this very dark. Okay, there you go. That's good enough. And now I'm going to put my blending brush in the water jar, pick up a dry blending brush, and start to blend everything in. So I'm going to swirl, right? I'm going to swirl, and I'm going to bring this, by the way, down like this so that I can blend this area here. All right, with the dry blending brush, we're going to start with the lightest area. And gently and press and swirl and fill in all the areas, even if you bring some of the darker ones, darker color in, that's totally fine. We just want to blend the colors in nicely. You see how that works? From lightest to darkest, barely pressing. And blend everything in, taking away all the brush strokes. And we got our background done. Okay, so I finished drying everything, so it's nice and dry. And quickly, while we still have paint, I'm going to use this lightest color with my number 4 brush and water. And I'm going to quickly sketch, go over the flowers and try to get an idea of my flower placements, right? Before I add colors and make it even more detailed. So I'm gonna use water and this lightest color and quickly, actually let's add even a lighter color. So I'm gonna add white by itself, just a small touch, and I'll show you. This will make it easier to see for you guys. So with water and just the white, mainly water, we're going to go over and kind of get a rough idea. Okay. This is so that you guys can see better. And remember, I'm doing this in a quick, rough way, but the shapes are totally up to each person. How you want to add them. So more water and white by itself, and we're kind of starting to add that next layer of detail, right? Before starting to add any more color to our flowers. So I'm going over here, remember this top? I'm gonna go almost to the top and there's different ways of doing this, you know. There's no right way to go about this. Maybe there's some little flowers here. Little petals. Let's continue with that color. I'm going to make this go down a little bit more like this. Okay, and then I'm going to add a little bit on this one, so I'm going to continue this little flower in here. And then maybe it separates in here, goes in like this, right? Starting to kind of see the shape of one flower, 2, 3, right? And obviously we'll work on adjusting them even more once we start adding more color. You'll start to see it a little better even. So here we're gonna remember that one flower that was kind of falling. Gonna add that in here. In the corner. And I didn't really like that, but that's okay. I'm going to use a paper towel, dab it in the water, right? And then while the paint is still wet, I'm just going to wipe it off. Okay. I'm going to be adding more details on the bottom, so it's, you know, more flowers and things that will cover. Okay, and remember this flower. And then this one, follow kind of where you think Again, I didn't like this one. That's okay. How it went over while my paint is still wet. I'm gonna bring it down a little bit, separate them. Like this. And then this flower, maybe it comes in here, something like that. There'll be another little flower almost opening on this side. We got the basic idea. Obviously, we'll adjust as we add more. But the next step is we're gonna get the colors of these. So this one's gonna be like, we're gonna have some blue, purple, maybe a little bit of highlights of pink or red. But it's gonna be more on the blue and purple side of this for this flower. This one's gonna be more like orange going into this red color here and pink. And then this one's going to be the same color, and then this one's going to be more on the pink red, hot pink red, and then these are going to be like green. We're going to add another little one here like this. And now, since I have paint left over, I'm going to quickly with my number 4 brush, right, and these colors I have left, right, I'm going to quickly use this lightest color with water and add some far away. Maybe these are leaves and just glaze it so it'll look faded. Right? Very, very small detail. I'm gonna lift this real quick, put it on this right here, and then I'm gonna just continue glazing. Oh, too much water. I'm gonna tap it on the paper towel. And I'm gonna kind of play with the colors I have and start to add a little bit more detail. Far away little leaves and things that you can barely see. Maybe there's another one. Kind of going into the flower, and then it's gonna come inside here like this, and then I'm gonna go over this one again. Make it a little lighter. Okay, and you'll see once we start to add some layers to our flowers, it'll all make sense. But this is the background, so it's going to be kind of blurry. For example, let's add another So these ones, I'm going to dab my brush in water. I'm going to use this color, the next lightest color. It's going to be dark still, but we want to make it look faded. Okay, that dark color. And make it look faded. So dab my brush in water, go back to the lighter color, and make certain parts light. So I'm going to use a little bit of this and some white, make it even lighter for some of the inside. And it's okay if you cover some of these. If you go over, each other, that's totally fine. Dab my brush in the water, go back to this color. I want to make this lighter in here. I'm going to squeeze part of the white out of the tube, just a little bit, and use a little bit of white as well. So for example, this color and a little bit of white to make it a little brighter. I want some of these parts to stand out. So a little more white. I want this one to be bright in here. A little more white. And you'll see one, like I said, once we add our other layers, you'll see. So we're going to come together nicely. So a little bit of this and white. Okay, and I'm going to also add that light color in here inside. I want to make some of these lighter. A lot of back and forth. Because these are in the background, right? I want to make sure they're not too strong. So a little more of this and white. And let's add some in here. Maybe there's some going in this way. Right, dab my brush in water. And a little bit of that in here. Maybe a little darker, not too bright. Okay, and now I'm gonna go to the darker color and add my dark shadows. All right, for example, right here. And kind of started doing it here. Use a little bit of the lighter color to blend those in, right? You can play with these shadows back and forth. So I'm going to use a little more of this and this one. So this connects here. Okay, and then I'm gonna make this a darker color in here. And then clean this part out. I want to make this a little cleaner, so I'm going to use the lighter color and cover this area we added, right? Now we're just kind of adjusting everything. All right, go back to the darker color. Dab my brush in water. I didn't like certain areas, so I'm going to go to the lighter color real quick. Areas I added and adjust. With a lighter color. And then maybe we can add a little bit of a lighter color inside. Maybe there's something going on inside. Highlight, bright highlight, right? Maybe in here. Bright highlight. Right? Okay, go back to the darker color, this one, and let's continue going over, for example, this one, right? We're gonna also make it dark. Maybe it all blends in here. Okay, same thing here. Let's use this color and start to add that layer here. And we're going to go over all these later with more detail, but this will help us, once we start to add color, this will help us see the positioning of everything. So real quick, I'm gonna add a darker, we could even use a little bit of this green color and add these darker parts of this flower, small flower here. Maybe it goes in and disappears. Something like this, all right? Same thing here, this darker color. I'm gonna make this a little more thicker, fluffier, and in here as well. I'm going to use this in a darker color and add some shadows, maybe a little bit of a lighter one. Connecting some of these in here. All right, I'm gonna mix some colors for our first flower. We're gonna focus on this top one. You could see I kind of made it bigger here. This is where originally I drew. I just made it like a little more bigger. I wanna make these pop. I made a little bigger here as well. It's like an inch from the canvas where it starts to the flower where it begins. And here it's half an inch, right? And here is an inch and a half from the top down where the first part of the flower begins, right? But remember, it does not, your size could be smaller or bigger, totally up to you. I just was looking at it and corrected certain parts and made it a little bigger. For example, here there was one of these was here, and so I made this flower a little bigger here, and then I moved this one. It was like this, moved it just lower here, right here, to create a little space. All right, so I used the colors that I had left to kind of, you know, blend in and erase certain parts and correct. But now it's time to fill in with color. And this is what I have for my first flower. We're gonna focus on this one first on top and work our way down. So these are the colors I added. I am going to make it more on the blue, purple side with a little bit of pink. So I added half a thumb amount of white and cobalt blue. A little bit of that, maybe half a thumb, and then half a thumb amount of white here, and then a little bit of scarlet red, and then very small amount of white here, and violet, and then violet by itself. I'm gonna mix these three and show you what I get. And here are the colors as the first layer. We got the light blue going into pink, and then purple, and then darker purple, and then I also added cobalt blue by itself in case I decide to use it. So these are the colors. Let's start here, and then we can always add more, but for our base, this is good. So we're just filling in, and I'm not trying to make it super perfect yet. So I'm gonna use my number 8 brush, make sure it's nice and damp. So I have a little bit of water in here, not too much. And we're gonna start with this lightest blue color we've mixed. And you can use a little bit of water and more paint for this part. And we're gonna glaze on the lighter highlights, go all the way to where you don't have to go all the way to the you know, to the corners, because we're gonna, with a detail brush, we're gonna go over those parts later. But we're just glazing, kind of getting an idea of where the light, bright highlights are. So I'm randomly adding, I'm gonna pick up more paint and then add some brighter highlights in here. And then work my way down. And it fades away somewhere. Down, and then pick up more paint. And right here, I'm gonna go right to the edge, not all the way, and just kind of bring it this way, let it fade out. It's going in. Okay, and then there's going to be like a little separation here. I'm going to dab my brush in the water and then pick up more paint. Water helps make it run smooth, right? So I'm barely pressing here. Okay, I'm only adding the blue highlights first, and then I'll go over everything with a different color. So right here, there's a little bit of blue going around the edge of this flower. I'm gonna bring it in. You wanna make sure you bring it in. For example, this flower goes in here, and this one goes in this way. So it all kind of goes in the middle. And this first part is still gonna look rough, but we're kind of putting in, you know, we're adding the color. This is the next step, so that we can start to see the picture a little better, and then we can adjust and correct later. So a little bit of that blue here, and then finally a little bit of that blue in here. Not a lot. Okay. All right. I can always come back later, but for now, that's good enough. Next, I'm going to use, let's use the cobalt blue by itself. A darker blue, and go next to where we added, and just kind of, you can even blend them in a little bit. Just add that darker blue. And I don't need to add it into the, or dab my brush in the water, because it's running pretty smooth for now. Okay, it's good. A little bit here, a little bit in here. And it's okay if you go over your lighter parts. It's totally fine. We're adding this first layer. It's gonna look rough. So a little bit in here of the blue, right? And a little bit in here. And in here. Okay, that's good enough. Next, I'm gonna clean my brush real quick in my water jar and then tap it on the paper towel. It doesn't have to be fully clean, but get most of the paint out. Let's use this pink color, and we're gonna add some lighter pink shadows with water. So I'm gonna dab my brush in the water a little bit and use a little more. We're just adding little glazes. So maybe in here, I want to add a little bit of pink. some areas, not everywhere. And then on the bottom here, I want to add lighter pink. I'm trying to create different colors of the flower. That's good enough. And a little bit of pink in here, showing through. Okay, that's good enough. Dab my brush in the water, tap it on the paper towel. Let's use this purple. Okay, this purple color with water, same technique. And we're gonna go over certain parts and add a little bit of purple. For example, right here. And a lot of this is gonna be pretty dark once we start going into, like, we're gonna add another layer of just the violet by itself. So we're gonna go over these colors again and create some darker shadows, but all these little details make our painting look interesting. So a little bit here and then a little bit of that purple in here, transitioning from that blue, right? And then let's continue in here. I'm going to use the light pink here. Kind of go in side like this. Maybe there's something going on there. All right, so before I forgot about this one, but that's okay. I'm going to go in with purple by itself and start to add a darker purple color. In the areas where I did not add anything, any colors. I'm going to dab my brush lightly in the water, continue with the purple by itself, and I'm going to add some darker shadows. With just the purple. I'm going to dab my brush in the water and tap it on the paper towel. I'm going to try to blend using a little bit of this pink color. Try to create a smoother transition into that lighter pink. But remember, this first layer, it does not have to be perfect. It's going to still look rough, but we're trying to get that, go back to the purple, get the first kind of layout down, right? All right, so now I'm going to go in here and continue adding these little details, separations. So there's going to be a dark separation in between here. I'm going to create a little transition. Dab my brush slightly in the water and tap it on the paper towel. And it's okay if you go over your pink we're gonna obviously be going back and forth. Okay, continue. I'm going to add the dark purple in here. And cover this area with purple. We're going to be going over all these parts again. And then here I want it to be darker as well, so I'm going to quickly go over like this and then okay, and then in here, I want to darken this spot as well. And dab my brush lightly in the water and tap it on a paper towel. Continue with the purple. Okay, something like this. All right. So we got kind of the first rough layer. I'm gonna real quick make a dark color. So I'm gonna use a little bit of lamp black, and I'm gonna take this purple, half of this purple with the black and then a little bit of cobalt blue. So black, lamp black, a little bit of that, and then half of these. It's going to be a dark color. It's almost going to be the same color as the background color we mixed, but you know, it's going to be a very slight difference, but you won't even see it. We just want a dark color, so it doesn't have to be exactly like the background. We just want a nice dark color, and for this part, I'm going to continue using my number 8 brush. I'm going to clean the brush, tap it on the paper towel, and then I'm going to use this color, dark one we just mixed. It's almost similar to the background color. And I want to add some darker shadows. Inside here on some of these parts. Okay, just on some parts, so that when we go into we're gonna add some orange little details in here, and you'll see it's gonna look real cool. That's the plan. And then in here, with this flower on the bottom, I wanna create a little separation. So what I'm gonna do is add a little bit of a separation in here. So I'm gonna add the dark area right in here. Maybe that's the background showing through. And we might have to add another layer to take away the brushstrokes. Okay. I'm going to create a little separation in here, a little bigger one. Okay. I'm going to switch to number 4 brush, okay, and add the same color, the darkest color, go around the edge right here, just a little bit. Okay. I'm just blending out with just water to create a smooth transition. Let this dry, this little part, because I just want to create a separation. Maybe that's a little bit of the background, like I said, showing through. But for now, I'm gonna continue with my number 4 brush, and using this dark color, we're gonna add some darker shadows. For example, I wanna make this stand out a little more, right? So I'm gonna go over and add, with water, add a little bit of a darker shadow. Okay. And then a little bit of that darker shadow in here. Remember, with water. You see how I'm creating these nice little shadows and separations? That's what makes our flower interesting looking. So I'm going to add a little more darker shadows in here. And dab my brush in water and tap it on the paper towel. If you feel like it's running, you could see it looks rough. So I constantly do that back and forth. And I hope that doesn't sound annoying to you guys, but I'm just really trying to explain everything I'm doing as I'm painting, because I am also going with the flow. You know, I'm, looking at the painting and adjusting and correcting, and I want to make sure I explain everything I'm doing so you guys hopefully can learn and catch certain techniques or the idea and why I do what I do, and hopefully it'll make sense to you. But basically now I'm adding darker shadows, a little more detail to our flower, but it's not going to be super, clean looking yet. But we are adding a little more, these little fine details and separations. So a little bit of darker details in here, and then a little separation. In some of these, areas, we will work with our detail brush to make even skinnier details. I'm just getting the bigger sections, like the bigger, that requires a little more, paint. And then with the detail brush, you can get really fine, small little details. Okay, and then in here, I want to make it dark inside. Like this. I want to make this a little darker, so I'm going to use just violet by itself, and I'm going to make this area a darker color. Maybe the shadow is covering a lot of the reflection, brighter reflections. So I'm going to dab my brush in water, use just the violet, and I'm going to glaze it gently over this area, make it a little darker. Okay, continue on with the darkest color, the one we just mixed, and we're going to continue adding our dark shadows, for example here. Okay, dab my brush in water, pick up more of the color. And this one kind of bends this way, right? It's like closing in. Everything's wrapping around. You know, you don't want to make it all straight. You want to make sure you add these curves, right? And the direction is totally like the way you want to, how, you know, much of a curl you want on your flower is totally up to each person. Alright, so I'm going to dab my brush in the water. I'm going to use a little bit of this lighter violet color going in here. Take away some of this sharpness. Just a little bit. Alright, so our first layer is done of our flower. And now I'm going to repeat the process and go back and make it a little more cleaner. For example, I'm going to clean my number 4 brush and obviously make sure everything is dry. And usually when you're spending so much time on the little details, it dries pretty quick because you're adding a very skinny layer, right? So it's nice and dry now. So you can go back with these colors, for example, this light blue and your number 4 brush, a little smaller brush, and you can go back and work on adding. You don't need to go all the way to the edge and make it too perfect, but kind of take away a little bit of add a little bit of a lighter highlight, right? But obviously we will, with our detail brush, go over and make even more cleaner lines. But this is just going over and adjusting now, making sure you're happy with your placement and your highlights and the way your flower curls and things like that, right? Right? For example, right here, you see how I'm adding the bigger parts. Add a little bit of a highlight in here. Okay, with that light blue. I'm going to use cobalt blue straight out of the tube. Alright, so you get the idea. Once you added your kind of quick second layer of the lighter highlights and the darker highlights, you can repeat this process again as many times as you want until you're happy with your shape, right? You can easily correct by using a darker. For example, if you wanted to make a separation here, right, more intense, then you can add that darker part in here, create some of these separations if you wanted to, right? So I'm gonna go back now and add a little bit of that darker color. For example, right here you see the brush strokes. Now that it's dry, I'm gonna add one more layer right in here. And it's gonna take away those brush strokes. Okay, that's good enough. And a little bit of a darker shadow inside so it can pop a little more, right? And I'm going to add a little more darker. Maybe these separate a bit more. And then quickly with your number 8 brush, just use the purple by itself with water. And I'm going to glaze it on the darker, in the middle mainly. I want to make it a little bit more on the purple side. So a little more right here mainly. It's a lot of back and forth. And like I said, it's okay if you go over this pink part. We're gonna work on that later once we go into adding our final details. But you could see by adding all these details, these layers, you start to see the image more clear and it's becoming a little more softer with color because of adding, you know, these layers, right? And you can use any color if you wanted to, even use any other blue, ultramarine blue, that would look nice on this piece as well, or even phthalo blue, right? Totally up to you. I just haven't used purple in a while and I thought it would be kind of cool to make my flowers be, you know, because I want to create like purple and orange. I think those go good together, those colors. But you could change up your colors and have fun with it, change it up and make it your own if you wanted to, right? So a little more. You could see I'm glazing it. I'm working transparently. I'm not adding a lot of paint, mainly water. But adding that extra layer, and then I'm going to clean my brush real quick. I'm going to go with ultramarine blue by itself with water, and I'm going to glaze it right where I left off. Glaze that ultramarine blue by itself. almost all the way to the top. And it's okay if you go over everything. It's just transparent glaze. If you've been enjoying this lesson so far and want to help support this channel, check out my Patreon. It's a great way to be a part of the creative process and help keep these tutorials ad-free and accessible to everyone. Inside Patreon, you'll get access to high-res reference photos, commercial-free versions of my YouTube lessons, behind-the-scenes content, and you can even help me vote on future painting topics. It's a small way to support this free content, but it makes a big difference. Thank you to everyone who supported me over the years. I appreciate you all. Now let's get back to painting. And here's what we got so far. Obviously, I'm going to go back and mix some more colors, similar colors, and finalize it and make it even more details. We are going to add some more details to this with a different color. There will be this like orange details inside our flowers, and I'll show you. But I'm going to continue before I work more on it. I want to make sure I add kind of similar idea the way I did to this one. Finish off these flowers, get the first layers, and then step back and see how I can adjust and correct later when I go into adding my final layers, right? This is the colors for this flower. Next flowers is about half a thumb amount of white, and then medium yellow, and then touch of orange, and then less white here, more orange and more medium yellow. And then we got less white here, a little bit of orange and scarlet red, and then scarlet red by itself. And then I will play probably with these colors I still have for the inside and dark shadows. All right, let's mix these three. And here we are. We got the very light orange, yellow color, and then more on a bright orange color, and then like a dark pink red, and then scarlet red by itself. So something like this. Let's clean our number 8 brush, and with a damp brush we're gonna start like we did with the blue one, with the lightest color and a little bit of water, and we're gonna create our brightest highlights first. Right to the edge, I'm gonna dab my brush slightly in the water so I'll have more water and it could run smooth for me. So here I'm going to just bring it down like this. You see how I'm going in? Okay, and then in here I'm gonna have a bright flower. Kind of following the shape that I already added, right? And if I make it a little bigger, that's fine. For this one, this part. Let's add pick up more of the yellow color. I'm going to actually so I made a little bit of I added a little bit of paint where I don't really want, but that's okay. While the paint is still wet, as always, with a paper towel and some water, you just kind of wipe it off. Erase your little paint mistake you made. Sometimes it's not a mistake, but sometimes it is. Okay, so I'm gonna continue working, and here what I meant was I'm actually gonna make this a little bigger and cover this leaf. I'm gonna make it one big leaf like this, because I want it to be balanced, this flower with the biggest flower we have on top, and you'll see what I mean once we start adding more layers. But that is why I like to have the basic layers kind of added, like this flower that we just did. Now I'm looking at it, I can see more clearly how I need to make it more balanced. And the way I do that is kind of like look at it and see, is that big flower really taken up? It's like taking my eye straight to it and it's taken over the whole image. And to balance it, I need to make another big flower, and then also the colors, the same thing works the same way. Is do I only have one? For example, we only have like 3 colors here of flowers, and 2 of them are going to be more on the orange, so that one on top is going to really stand out. And how can I balance it? And the way to do that is by adding this orange color on some of the parts on top here, and I'll show you what I mean by that. But that's the same idea with color. You want to make sure everything's kind of balanced and works well together. And these first quick sketches that we're adding will help us see the image better. So here I'm going to make this a little bigger. A little bigger and more rounder, like this. We might even make it bigger later, but for now that's good. I'm going to dab my brush in the water, pick up more of the brightest color we mixed. Alright, that's good enough. Let's use the orange. Orange that we added right next to the colors the lighter yellow, right? And let's glaze it quickly. It's going to be a quick sketch with just the orange. And then in here, some areas. Okay, and in here. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit of the lighter color in here. Alright, so now I'm going to clean my brush and use this red color. Continue where you left off. Okay, and then here we're going to use just the red by itself and add a little bit of a darker red inside. Dab it in the water, pick up more red, and here I'm going to clean my brush, and I want to actually use some purple. So I'm going to use purple by itself and add to, remember like I said about balancing, I want to add a little bit of purple here and then also add orange on this flower, and you'll see how I do this, and that will make my painting more balanced. So just a quick glaze. It's going to look rough, like I said in the beginning. It's going to look rough, but we will make it softer later. We're just adding all these colors first, filling in the blank spaces. So just the purple here. We're kind of starting to add a little bit of shadows, right? But not really. Not too much. Okay, looks rough still, but you'll see. We'll add more details and it's going to come to life. But let's continue working on our flower here and getting a rough sketch. Since it's a smaller flower, I'm going to use my number 4 brush, go back to this yellow color, bright color, and we're going to quickly add our bright highlights first. Rough sketch. And this one's going to be more in the background, so it's not going to be as bright. So I'm going to actually use orange now and get more of it, making it look a little more faded. So a little bit of orange. And then let's use this red. Pink red, add it in. Okay, and then we're gonna add the red by itself on the bottom. And then on some of these parts real quick. Okay, and then let's add a rough layer of violet by itself with water. Okay, that's good enough. Let's continue here. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use my flat brush for this part real quick so you guys could kind of see. I'm gonna obviously go over everything again, but for a rough sketch for you guys to see, I'm gonna use this pink with my flat brush, and I'm gonna add some lines. For example, right in here, I'm going to go bring it down, and then dab your brush in the water, right, so you can run smooth, and use this pink. And with this pink, we're just gonna create these sharp lines. And this is to give you guys an idea, you know. So obviously, it's once we add our second layer and third layer, it's going to be, I'm probably going to be covering a lot of this, but I just want to add these details so that I can step back and see if I'm happy with the size of my flower, and if I need to, when I go into adding the final layers and correcting, and this is where I really decide the final placement and the shape, right, of everything. But this will give me a little bit of a better idea. So I could skip this step, but I think this will help me when I go into adding my final layers. So something like this, really, you know, it's rough looking, but we're gonna make it look nicer later. And then also, I'm gonna clean my brush real quick, and let's use a little bit. Let's go back to number 4 before I do anything. I wanna actually make this part a little darker. So what I'm gonna do is use a little bit of this red and maybe the darkest color we mix those randomly together, and I wanna bring this in a little bit, create a separation maybe. Make it look faded. We just want to make it look darker. Something like this. It's rough, but that's okay. So now I'm going to use this bright color with my flat brush, and inside I'm going to create these little details. Okay, It's rough looking, but it will give me an idea of what I need to do when I go into adding that layer, the final layer. Okay, something like this. I don't want to overdo it. I can always, with my detail brush, go in and correct. All right. All right, so I'm gonna put the camera on top here of this purple blue flower we added, and I'll show you what I mean by balancing the colors. So obviously I'm gonna go over and add a little more purple inside. I really want my inside to be very dark and have some blue and purple in it. So I'm gonna add more purple inside, right? Like this, once the layers are dry, right? And you see I'm going over everything I kind of added, but that's okay. That's what it takes to create a beautiful painting. You have to go back and forth with your colors until you're happy with your placement. And I'm gonna quickly show you what I mean by balancing color and the whole image with size of flowers and things like that. This is important, and it will improve your artwork when you focus on the color balance and also the size of your flowers and whatever you're painting, right? If you make something too big, and it can, you know, it can take too much attention away if it's not the main focus, right? So a little bit of that purple with water. Obviously we'll go over it again, and then maybe inside here, a little bit of that purple in here. So for this part, I'm going to use my flat brush again, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use this yellow, brightest color with water, and to balance the image, I'm going to have a couple of these random little details going in the flower like this and out. And then maybe there's something in here. Going in. Okay. And then obviously we'll add little details. I'm going to use orange by itself and add a little bit of orange on the bottom. And this is again a rough layer. And then you can use the red on the very bottom. And here's what I mean. You could see it's still looking rough, but we're kind of seeing the picture better and better each time. You see how I added the purple and the blue in here, and that balances the image a little better. And then with the orange I added on top of this flower. Obviously we're going to go over and make it sharper and cleaner looking, more detailed, but you could see now the colors are balanced, right? We're going to work on these final couple here on the bottom. For these two flowers, we're going to add some green to them, and I added medium yellow and viridian, and then viridian by itself, and I'll use the colors I have already. Okay, so let's get a green color and see what we get. Okay, quickly mix that. All right, and here's what we got, right? A green, lighter green shade here, and we're gonna pick up our number 4 brush. First, we're gonna start on the inside. So what I'm gonna do is use this pink. Let's use this pink first and add bright highlights, something like this. All right, that's good enough. I don't wanna add too much. And then here, maybe a little bit. Not too much, right there. And then we're going to use the red, just the red by itself. And then we're gonna just mix that in with the pink we just added. And it's gonna look rough, but it'll do the job. Okay, something like this. All right, same thing here. Let's add the pink just a little bit here because I want this to be a little more on the green side. So now I'm gonna use, let's use the purple. Why not? Let's use the purple right here. Connect those colors together. Right here. The purple. Okay, that's good. And now we can finally go into the green. So I'm gonna start with the light green real quick and add a glaze in here on top and create that lighter highlight. Let it fade out. Let's add some green in here to this one. Okay, some green to some of these here with water. We're just going to glaze it on the bottom. And then green on this side. All right, and now I'm going to use viridian, so a little bit of this and viridian by itself. Fill in the areas we, actually let's just use viridian. Areas where we kind of left off. Okay, let's add viridian in here. And then we're going to use the darkest color, this one, remember, with water, and this darkest color. I'm going to start to add some darker shadows. And remember, this is still a rough layer. I'm just going to quickly fill in the empty spaces, and then when I step back, I will and adjust and correct the way I think would look best. So I'm going to add a little bit of that darker shadow in here on some of these. I'm going to add a little more brighter green in here. Some highlights. Make darker red in here and the darkest color. Mix those two together. I want to make this one pretty dark. All right, and here's the view of the whole image so that you can see how it looks so far. This is a good time to take a break, step back, and make sure you're happy with the size of your flowers and the colors of your flowers. This is the part where you decide what you want to change. If you don't like your colors, change it to a different color, right? If you think that there should be another flower, go ahead and do that. This is the part to do that before going into mixing our final color and final layers to add to our flowers. So adjust and correct, totally up to you. Now I'm gonna mix some more colors and we're gonna start fresh from work our way from the top down. And here we have a half a thumb amount of white, and then cobalt blue, and then about the similar white as this one, and then scarlet red, and then less white here, and then a small amount of cobalt blue and violet, more violet, and then by itself cobalt blue and violet, and then more violet here, and a touch of lamp black for the darkest color. So this will be the second and third layer, adding and making it look softer, just adjusting the colors and taking away any kind of white canvas showing through, right? And then we're going to use detail brush to add our smaller details, and I'll show you. But let's mix the colors first. And here's the colors I got. All right, so now I'm gonna repeat the process. I'm gonna use my number 8 brush real quick with water, right? A little bit of water, and let's start with this light blue. And I'm gonna go over certain parts. Work transparently because I have water, right? and then go over and brighten certain parts that I think should be brighter, and then with a detail brush we'll make it cleaner. So this is where the light is hitting this part the most. So I'm barely pressing, gently moving the paint because I have water. Okay, that's good right there. I'm gonna pick up more of the lightest color, add some in here. Okay, continue on. And here it's gonna, I don't want to add too much, I want to keep it pretty dark in here. So I'm going to add a few more, and that's it. Like this. And here, and add a little bit in here as well. And then a little bit in here, not too much. Dab my brush slightly in the water, use more water, and then glaze it gently. Okay, and then I'm going to add a little bit of that light blue inside. Barely pressing. And it creates this beautiful little details. Helps us skip certain parts when we go into detailing, you know. We wouldn't have to add certain details like that. So that's why it's nice to work very lightly pressing, you know, and peeling paint, and then it creates little lines for you naturally, which saves time. But we want to add a little bit for this next layer. Right now what we're focused on is making it our, you know, flower look softer. All right, so now I'm gonna clean my brush real quick. I'm gonna work on with the pink now. I'm gonna go in here and I wanna go over these areas real quick. I'm gonna dab my brush in the water so it could run smooth, and pick up small paint, not much. Okay, that's good right there. I don't want to overdo it. And then I'm going to add the pink in here as well. Okay, barely pressing. Let's add some pink in here. And now, same idea with water and this purple color we mixed. I'm gonna go over certain parts and add where I want my purple colors to show. So in here, I'm gonna go in with the pink a little bit, kind of blend those in gently. I wanna create that nice smooth transition. You could see this third layer, right, is making it look softer. Start to see more of smooth transitions happening. That is the goal. I'm going to add a little more purple in here. right, that's good enough. And maybe on this side. Okay, I'm going to clean my brush, and I'm going to use cobalt blue by itself with water and add some blue, like certain areas that I think should have more blue, and I'm going to go over and glaze it on. For example, right here I want to make it a little more on the blue side, so just a cobalt blue and water, and then just spend some time blending. All right, that's good. And finally, for the purple by itself, violet, and the darker part, we're just gonna glaze it where the darker parts are and bring everything in nicely together. Even if you bring the paint a little bit more down, that's okay. Blend those colors in together nicely. We want this area to be pretty dark, so I'm going to add more purple. And use water. You see how when you use water, it works transparently and it like blends the paint in nicely. And the goal is to create bright highlight on top and then darker on the sides, and then maybe a little bright area inside here. So here, I'm going to actually dab my brush in the water and tap it on the paper towel. I'm barely going to have some violet color, and I'm going to glaze it over the pink. So the pink will have more of a little bit of a purple tone to it. I want this to be still pretty dark. Okay, that's good enough. So I'm going to continue with purple on this side because I still want my purple to stand out here. So I'm going to continue, make this area dark. It's more in the shadow. And I'm going to go over, glaze it. And it's okay if you go over your orange flowers here. Okay, and then a little bit on here. All right, now you could see it's looking a lot softer. So now I'm gonna use my detail brush to finalize this flower, and we're gonna come back to the orange parts later, but we just focused on this purple blue colors in here. So with a detail brush and some water, we're gonna start with the bright highlights first. So go back to this light blue and some water, and we're gonna swirl with water because water will help spread the paint nicer and make it more smoother looking. So a little bit of water in this paint, and we're gonna and I'll show you a little bit of it, and then I'll show you at the end, because this is basically the same technique and just adding it everywhere, going back and forth. This will take me a long time if I just show you the whole process of the painting, right? But I'll explain the main parts, and I'll let you complete the painting. So the goal is to add the bright highlights on top, like I mentioned before, right around here on top. And not everywhere. Don't make it too perfect, all the highlight everywhere. Some of the darker parts like here, we're gonna be like skipping them, right? We're not gonna be painting the bright highlights there. But the goal is to add the bright highlights on top. It's kind of already happening, as you see, right? And then after that, we're gonna use a different color, and I'll show you. So with this color, we're gonna start from this corner and work our way this way. So for example, and you can make yours looking a little bigger, and this is where you can adjust and correct. So here I'm going to bring it in. So I'm dabbing my brush in the water and swirling to pick up more paint. And here I'm gonna first shape it, and then bring it in like this. And we don't need to do it everywhere. Some are gonna be, it's gonna be more brighter than the others. Okay, that's good enough right there. We can skip some areas in here. Don't need to add everywhere. Add a little bit in here on the inside. Dabbing my brush in the water, continue with the bright highlight. Okay, that should be good. I'm not gonna overdo it. I can always add more later, but let's just be done with that one. So that's the goal. You see, I'm kind of following the shape and the pattern of my flower. And then here, I'm gonna pick up more paint. Here, I'm just following the pattern and shape, and sometimes I'm making them a little bigger, and let it fade out. And add your highlights. Make them wavy. Just follow the pattern. You know, your shape could be a little different than mine, and that's okay. As long as you follow the pattern and let it naturally happen. The waves and little bright highlights. Here I'm not going to add too much. I'm just going to go in like this and maybe correct in here a little bit. That's good enough. Continue on. So here I'm going to use the pink, the light pink color, and make this one so I'm just trying to add different colors, you know. I'm going to add a little bit of pink on here just to create variety of color. Okay, totally up to you. All right, that's good enough. I'm not gonna overdo it. We can always come back later. So now I'm gonna continue and add a little bit of pink in here, why not? All right, I'm gonna clean my brush, go back to the light color, light blue with water, and do the same thing and start from this flower. So make it sharper looking. Remember how I said certain areas we're gonna be skipping. So a little more paint. Make it look a little more sharper. Okay. Picking up more paint. And there's going to be a lot of little lines in here. Remember how I said I'm going to skip some areas? That's what I'm going to do here. And let it fade out. Okay, we don't want to go too much in, but we do want to add a bunch of little ones in here. Okay, I'm going to skip certain parts. Continue adding my bright highlights. Dabbing my brush in the water constantly, picking up more paint. And your, lines don't have to be perfect. I'm going to skip some of these areas here. I don't want to add too much. I want to keep this pretty dark in here. Okay. So I'm going to continue this technique all around on this flower, following the pattern. And then once I'm done, I'll show you what I get. And here we are with the light highlight. We're gonna repeat with the darker highlight now and add more details. So darkest color here, and our detail brush doing the same technique. And we're gonna go over the darker parts and add a little more separation. For example, right here, right? I'm gonna make it cleaner and add that nice separation between those two. And I don't want to overdo it, but I do want to add a few of these. It will make my flower stand out a little better. Okay, so maybe some in the middle here. And I'm going to go over here and try to clean this up a bit. Make it sharper here. Like I said, we're going to go over these later. Make this darker in here. Almost blending into the background. Okay, so I'm going to continue here doing that, adding the darker highlights. Barely pressing on some areas. And that will make my flower have a little more character. Okay, so you could add little dark dots on some parts, you know how flowers are not have all sorts of stuff on them. Okay, so now I'm going to continue on this side. So this side right here, I want it darker. Okay, so I'm going to continue that same technique throughout this painting and finish it off here. And this is totally up to you how many dark shadows you want to add. It does not have to have the same placement as mine. And here's how it looks. You can add as much detail as you want, going back and forth with the light highlights and the dark highlights. Or if you don't like it to be too sharp, you can come back with your number 8 or number 4 brushes and make it smooth by adding these lighter highlights and going over them. Very easy. It's totally up to you, and you can add as many layers as you want. But we're going to move on for the sake of time, and we're going to mix some colors and finish off this flower with the orange colors that we added here. I added a half a thumb amount of white here, a small amount of medium yellow, and a touch of orange. And then here, less white, a little more medium yellow, and more orange the most. And then just scarlet by itself. And here are the colors. So I'm going to use my number 4 brush, clean out all the paint, tap it on the paper towel, and start with the lightest color. This will be pretty easy and simple because there's not much. And we're just going to add the bright highlights, going over and shaping them again. Okay, like this. And then in here, I'm going to use a different brush actually, because, well, let's continue with this one for the bigger parts actually. Let's use this color, and then we're going to just bring it down about this much. Here I'm going to use the detail brush. Okay, something like this. I'm going to now clean my brush and use the orange. Just use the orange right here that we mixed, and then we're going to go down right in here and blend these in right here. Blend that orange with water, and that will make it glow. All right, and then finally we're going to do the same thing with water and a little bit of scarlet red, and we're going to add it on the very bottom here. We're trying to create a smooth fade. Okay, so a little more water and scarlet red, and on the side here. And if you go over some of your, if you go over a little bit, that's fine. You can always use the colors here again to correct and adjust. Okay, just a little bit like this of red. And now we can go into detail brush and start with the brightest color and water, and same technique like always. And we're going to make it sharper and make it a little more softer looking. Adding these little fine details. I'm barely pressing, letting it fade. Same thing here. Going over and letting it fade. Okay, a little bit here, make this one, and you can make some of them bigger too. Make this one go in. Okay. And go around and add your bright highlights and let it fade like we mentioned. That's good right there. I'm going to add a little bit more in here. just a little bit more like this. So I'm dabbing my brush in the water, using that brightest color again, and we're gonna go over and start to add a little more details. Okay, maybe these are going in. I'm gonna make this a little taller. Right? Having fun with this. Creating my own shapes, letting it fade to that. Darker red color here. We don't want to go too low. So I'm going to dab my brush in water, continue with the brightest color, letting it fade like this. So I'm going to finish it off here and I'll show you what I get. Okay, and now I'm going to use orange and go on the right side and add a little bit of orange color to the right side. These are some of the final details here for this flower. You could add some skinnier ones by themselves here. Maybe there's one going in like this. Okay, on the right side, we're going to continue adding that orange highlight so that our flowers can pop a little better and won't look flat. Okay, and finally, and then here we will add a little bit of orange, not much. This one's good as it is. And then finally, with the red by itself and some water, we're going to add some dark red on the bottom. Maybe on the right side, go over some of these with the red. And there you go. Gonna add some red in here for fun. All right, now we're gonna continue with these flowers, and I'm gonna use the colors I already have mixed, right? And then the only thing I did add was scarlet red and a little bit of violet. I'm gonna mix those two. That's gonna be for like this part right here. I wanna make it super dark here. And I also decided to add another color, a light one. So a little bit of white, touch of medium yellow, and a small amount of violet. But this is the color I got. It's darker than the scarlet red. Let's pick up our number 8 brush, make sure it's nice and damp and have some water. I'm gonna quickly go with this color that we just mixed. I'm gonna add that here. and you'll see why I'm doing this later. I'm going to glaze it, and it's going to fade out to the bottom, but I'm going to glaze it right here, and you'll see. Okay, that's good enough for now. And I'm gonna go back to the yellow now, this brightest yellow color we still have. And if you need to mix more, you can easily add white, a little bit of medium yellow, and orange. Okay, but I'm gonna use up all the paint I have left, and I'm gonna go over the brightest areas, add that second layer. Just glaze it gently with water, and then go over all the lighter parts. Just quickly go over your lighter parts, fill in the areas, and I dab my brush slightly in water, pick up more paint, All right, that's good enough. Here I'm gonna go over. For this part I'm gonna use a number 4 brush, but I'll do that one later. Let's just continue focusing on this flower here. So next I'm gonna use the orange and add the orange, glaze it right where we left off on the bottom. Okay, continue on with some orange. A little more. Okay, that's good enough. Now I'm going to go in and add this darkest color actually. We just mixed. I'm going to go in mainly add it in the middle and blend it outwards. And it's okay if you cover what you just added, all the first layer, right? It's fine if you cover it. That was to give us an idea. We're just trying to create a smooth transition first. Okay, that's good enough. Okay, so I'm gonna switch to number 4 and quickly go over this one as well. Try to make it cleaner, right? It's not gonna be perfect. For this part, but when we go into adding our details with the detail brush, it'll be a little more clear. And closer to perfect. Or perfect. So now orange, adding that glaze a little bit in here, right? That's good. And then we could even use a little bit of pink. So a little bit of this pink, maybe add a little more red, so it'll be a darker pink. I'm gonna make this one a little darker in here, maybe because of the shadow of our flower. I'm gonna use a darker pink. From this flower, maybe it's gonna be a little more on the darker side here, and on this side as well. Let's add a little bit of the pink on here. And then a little bit of the pink, same idea. Mix it with scarlet red. I want to make this have some pink to it. Just gonna glaze it and cover it all with the pink here. With water, I'm glazing. And then go back to the lighter color. Let's use this darkest red color. Glaze it in here. And then we could use a little bit of this and orange. Mix those randomly and add a little bit of orange in there. We're just mixing colors, trying to make certain areas, make it softer looking before really going into detailing with the brush, detail brush. All right, so next I'm gonna add a little bit of red in here. And darker red. place that darker red in here. Go back to your yellow color, and I want to lighten certain areas in here. And then maybe go back to the orange and a little bit of pink and orange, mix those randomly together. And then use a little bit of red. Let's actually use this darker color. Blend it in. A little bit of orange. I know it's random. I'm just adding a bunch of colors and trying to blend them in. So now I'm going to clean my brush and use the lighter color. And I'm trying to create a soft transition from this light area right here going into a little bit of a pink, darker red, orange, whatever it turns out into. You see that? How that works? That's the goal. There you go. Made it look a little softer. And that's what we want. All right, that's good enough. We can always come back to any of these parts later, but that's a good second, third layer of our flowers. Now we can use our detail brush and do the same techniques like we did with the first flower. We're gonna go back and I'm gonna actually mix some more of this color. I'm running low, so I'm gonna add a little bit of titanium white, medium yellow, and orange. And here we are. And it doesn't have to be exactly the same as this one, okay? Something similar and it'll be good enough. As long as it's a lighter color and it's not a darker color than this, you're going to be good to go, because this is the brightest highlights, so we want to make sure it's pretty bright. So again, I'm going to follow the patterns and make it sharp and go around and try to let it naturally come together. So this will take some time, going back and forth. But little by little, it'll be done. All right, so I'm gonna continue doing this. You get the idea, right? Let it come in. Maybe this one comes in and loops around and goes in like this. The highlight, right? But I'm gonna continue working around, and once I'm done, I'll show you what I get. All right, so you can add as much as you want, right? I can always come back to any of these parts later, but the light highlight is done. And now I'm going to clean my detail brush and do the same kind of idea with the darkest cherry color we have mixed here, right? We're going to use this and we're going to create some sharp details to our flower. For example, there's going to be like little sharp details. Okay. Something like this. Little veins in the flowers. Dab my brush in water, continue. So I'm going to finish it off and show you what I get after. So now I'm going to use the red and a little bit of this darkest color. And I'm going to, right in the middle, I'm going to try to add the dark shadow. Okay, so I'm going to clean my brush and use, remember this color we mixed? Let's use this color and water. And this is where we're going to add these little details. Bright details. And now I'm gonna use this lightest color and connect. Remember these? Quickly connect. Some of them are gonna be going to the side here just to create variety. And one right here. Okay. And you can add and make them as big as you want, right? And as many as you want. And we're just gonna bring it down. All right, rough sketch. Now I'm gonna use my orange, and then we're going to add some color. Kind of like what we did to the other flower. Just gonna go over randomly. Quickly go over some of them. And as you go down, you can use the red by itself, just the red and water. And let's connect some of these. Okay, something like that. And now I'm gonna go back to the lightest color and try to make it a little cleaner. You can even add, let's add some medium yellow straight out of the tube and brighten it up a bit, just to create different shades. So just yellow straight out of the tube, and let's just add it all over here. Maybe there's some that are coming kind of towards us. Okay, that's good enough. And then with the detail brush and the darkest color right here, we're going to try to correct some of these, make them a little darker and connect. Right in here, I'll show you. Going in. And the darkest color in the middle, so you can pop this darkest color, and we're gonna just Continue on. With our number 4 and violet color with water, we're going to add a little bit of purple to balance the image. I'm going to add some purple on, go over these. And now you can step back and see if you want to come back and correct certain parts. That's what I'll do. I'll spend some time making it a little softer, going back to the light color in my detail brush, and then just trying to add a little more details like this, right? Totally up to each person and up to you how much you want to add. So take your time and enjoy the process. If you're loving this tutorial and you're ready to go deeper with your painting, I'd love to invite you to my mentorship program. This is where I teach my most in-depth lessons, the ones I don't share anywhere else. Inside the mentorship, you'll get access to exclusive full-length tutorials, personalized feedback on your paintings from me, live Q&A calls where you can connect and ask questions, monthly painting challenges, giveaways, and more. This is my inner circle of artists who are serious about growing their skills. It's been amazing to see the progress our members make, and I'd love for you to join us. If you're interested, there'll be a link in the screen or also in the description down below. All right, let's get back to painting. And finally, for the last section, we're going to work on this part right here. So these are the colors I added for that. So I'm going to have this more on the pink side and then some green. And then I'm going to try adding some purple just to balance it and see how it looks. If I like it, I'll leave it. If I don't, I'm going to make it another pink one here. We'll see. But these are the colors I have, so I'll explain. Half a thumb amount of white here, and then a little bit of scarlet red, and then less white here, a touch of violet, and more scarlet red, and then scarlet red and violet by itself, so more scarlet red here. And then for our green shade, we have a little bit of white, viridian, and medium yellow, and then viridian and medium yellow by itself. And then for our purple flower, we have a little bit of white, violet, violet by itself. And then for our dark, for the stems and the dark shadows, we're going to add viridian and lamb black. So I'm going to mix the colors and show you what I get. And here's what I got. So light pink. And when adding violet a little bit to the scarlet red, it makes it more of a hot pink color. So that's why I did that. I want to make it look more like cherry color, right? So that's the 3 shades. And then for the green, you got the light green and then the darker. I did add a little more viridian to this one, just so you guys know, to make it a little darker. And then here we have the light purple, purple by itself, violet, right? And then the dark green, the very dark color. So something like this. Now I'm going to zoom in the camera and we're going to finalize the painting by making these detailed. Let's pick up our number 4 brush. When I was mixing paint, I always let these sit in the water for a little bit so that my brush can become soft. And then I'm going to dab it on the paper towel and I'm ready to paint. So let's start with the light pink. So we're going to pick up this color with water, right? Like we did with the other flowers, same technique. And we're going to use this color to go over the lighter parts real quick. I'm not even going to add too much here. Just going to add a little bit, and then that's good enough here. I don't want to overdo it. Okay, I'm going to dab my brush in the water and then tap it on the paper towel. I don't need to clean my brush fully because all these colors are going to mix. Let's pick up the next pink color and then glaze it on the other parts of your flower. Kind of start blending. We might have to go back and forth on this, but that's okay. All right, we're adding that next pink color, a little more of it. Okay, and then I'm gonna dab my brush in the water, tap it on the paper towel, pick up the next darkest pink color we've mixed, and blend it in right next to where we left off, the dark spots. Okay, a little more. And as I go up here, it's going to be more on the lighter side. So I'm going to dab my brush in the water and then use this color. Try to make it a little blended here. Smoother transition like this. Same thing here. Okay, and dab my brush in the water, and let's continue using this. Maybe a little bit of the lighter pink, since we're going up where it's a little lighter, right? We want to create that smooth transition. Maybe this bottom part is more in the shaded area. Okay, so I'm going to dab my brush in the water, clean off the paint real quick on the paper towel. Let's just use the light pink with water, and we're going to blend these areas. The top area right here, while the paint is still wet, trying to create that nice bright highlight. Okay, and a little bit here. And that's it. Let it fade in. All right, here I'm looking at this, and this is where I am gonna decide if I like how it looks. So I'm gonna dab my brush in the water, take a little bit of the sharpness here with the middle pink color. Okay, just like this, and then finally go back to the dab my brush in the water, tap, and then clean it on the paper towel. Let's use this pink color, and we're just gonna finalize it by adding that darkest color, barely pressing, right, like this, and then maybe a little bit in here. Okay, that's good enough. All right, so that's done right there. I like how it looks. So now, before we add, I'm gonna clean my brush completely. I'm gonna do the same thing since we're working on the colors first. I'm gonna work on adding the purple flower. So I'm gonna use this light purple. We only have 2 colors here because it's a very small amount. And I'm gonna add a little bit of that purple in here. Okay, and looking at this already, I like it because it's really making my painting more balanced. And then kind of dab, maybe it's going in I'm gonna make it a little taller. Let it all happen naturally. But just these little details, right, of color brings the painting nicely together. So now I'm gonna clean my brush and quickly pick up violet color. All right, violet, and then on the bottom here, we're gonna add a little bit of violet. So we can have variety of colors. Okay, that's good. So we have a little bit of color, not too much. And I'm gonna actually also, I'm gonna clean my brush. I'm looking at this and I'm gonna, for fun, add probably another little bit of violet color on this side. So light violet. See how that looks. Maybe it's almost, you can almost see it. We'll see maybe right here. Barely see it, just a little bit of that color. And then we don't need to clean our brush. Let's use violet. And then on the bottom. That's good enough. Okay, not too much. So a little more back to the light violet. I'm gonna take away the darkness of it. Like that. All right, so now I'm gonna clean my brush completely. And I'm actually gonna bring the violet a little lower. Like this. That's good enough. All right. Now I'm gonna clean my brush and I'm going to start adding the green parts. So let's use water and the lightest color. And we're just gonna add a nice highlight here. And some of these parts we're gonna be using our detail brush going over. I'm just getting the bigger part sections first, and then with the detail brush we'll make it a little more cleaner. So let's just do that for the lighter part right here, and then that's good right there. I'm gonna pick up more of this lightest color and start to add a little bit on this side. And then in here, just follow the pattern. Okay, that's good enough. Now I'm going to clean my brush, use the next green color, this one, with a little bit of water, and we're going to glaze it kind of like what we did with the pink and the purple. Gently glaze it. And we're trying to create that smooth blend. Oh, too much water. I'm going to tap it on a paper towel. And then pick up more paint. See, when the water's dripping like this, it doesn't blend well. So we don't want too much water. Just a little bit. Okay, a little more paint. I'm going to start to blend. Okay, and finally, let's use this darkest color here. Okay, this darkest color, and I'm gonna go over these darker shadows. Dab my brush lightly in the water and tap it on the paper towel. Pick up a little bit of that dark color. Okay, a little bit on here, this one. And in here. I'm gonna dab some of the darker color inside gently. Okay, that's good. All right, so I'm gonna continue with the dark color, and I also when I was adding the highlights here, I added that, continued that light highlight on the left side right here, as you see, with water, and on this side for the other flower. And then since there's 3 flowers, I'm missing 1 stem, so I want to actually add 1 more, maybe coming from the side right in here. Okay, that's good enough. All right, so now I'm going to clean my brush, and then I'm going to use a little bit more. Let's use a little bit more of this light green, and I'm going to mix it with a little bit of this darkest green, because I want to make it look a little more on the, not too strong in color. Make it like a grayish green, like this. Okay, something like this. So a little bit of this darkest color, and I'm gonna try to glaze it right here over the bright highlights we just added. I just don't want them to be too sharp in color. I want to make it look a little more faded. So just a little bit of this paint. All right, that's good enough. And now we can work with our detail brush, and we can always go back and forth and correct things, but now we're gonna start with this flower. And so what I'm gonna do is use the lightest pink, and let's do this. I wanna add a little bit of yellow. So I'm gonna add a little bit of white and medium yellow. Let's do that. A little bit of medium yellow. Just a small touch, and I'll show you. And we're gonna, so a little bit of white, touch of medium yellow. I'm gonna take part of this pink, right? I'm going to take it about this much because I still want it to be more on the pink side, but I want to have that warmer glow to it for my highlights for this flower here. So you can kind of balance these bright flowers in the middle. Okay, so it'll look still on the pink side, but it has a little warmer tone to it. So with my detail brush and some water, as always, we're going to swirl, and with this color, we're going to start to add some details. For example, right here, right, I'm going to dab my brush in the water, and I'm going to continue fade it out here. Okay, we'll go over here and follow your pattern and shape. So I'm using a little more water so I can blend those in, and so that it can blend in with the pink. Okay, something like that. Continue on. Same thing here. And here it's going to be more on the darker side, so I'm not going to add too much of the bright highlights there. So I'm going to quickly switch or go to this darkest red color with the detail brush, and now I'm going to try to correct, for example, right here, right? I'm going to try to connect those. Continue on with a dark color. Okay, actually here, I don't like the shape of this. I'm going to make another one a little bit on the side right here. Try to blend those in. And then maybe use a little bit of the lighter pink just to create some highlight. And then the lightest pink color. All right, something like this. So I'm gonna use this color that we just mixed. And then I'm gonna use the light green. Start to transition into the green. And now this is where you just shape it out, make it a little more smoother, take away the brush strokes, right? For example, right here, we're gonna add a little separation and connection so it can look a little cleaner. And we're gonna also add the highlight. Let's use a little bit of this color so it won't be too green. And then we're gonna just continue adding the bright highlight. Like we did here, right? And then let's add a little bit of that bright highlight here. Not too much, so I'm using more water. So that's what I'll do. Now I'm gonna go back to the light green with water and try to add a little bit of a brighter details. Maybe that one didn't look good. That's okay. I'm gonna go back to the dark color, darkest color, and correct. Try to separate some of them. So same thing with the darkest color. I'm gonna try to add some dark shadows so that our flower can stand out a little more. So now you can play with the colors, you know, the light green, the darker green, and you just want to make it like a smooth transition, fading in, right? So make it as soft and as detailed as you want it to be. with water and paint, this is where you can play. So right here, I'm gonna use the lightest green and do the same thing, add my brighter highlights, and go over with the detail brush. Okay, so that's what I'll do. I'll finalize this, and then here, same idea. We're gonna work with the light green and try to clean it up a little bit, make it sharper looking. And add those brighter highlights. For example, right here, you see that? And then here. And then once you're done with that, you can go with a dark color and go over the areas. For example, right here, right? You want to separate them and create a darker shadow. Alright, I'm going to work on detailing, finishing this painting. It's the same thing, going back and forth with the colors, and totally up to you how light or how bright you want it. You can even add some for fun with the lightest color here. You can even add some little details in here, like this, right? Just to make it look more interesting and detailed. These little details make your painting come to life, and that's what makes it look interesting. So have fun with this, and then once I'm done here, I'll show you what I get. And here it is. I'll be done for today. You could spend as much time as you want on any part. I had fun adding some details here. Totally up to you. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Thank you guys for being here. Please be sure to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more. Take care and God bless.